an old mentor of mine actually said something once that has resonated for a very long time, and it's a quote from Abraham Lincoln, and he wrote a letter which was like 3 pages to a general of his, and at the very end there's a postscript saying, "I'm sorry that this letter was so long, I didn't have time to write a short one." Wax poetic.
So let's start with why you went into RevOps and maybe a bit about maybe the company. And then you fire away on everything that you're doing and we'll go from there.
Okay, I started in RevOps pretty much the same way. I graduated with a bachelor's in science, math, statistics, and economics, and so it was pretty analytical. And then also had, I guess, the mindset that you mentioned earlier, which is I like to be in everybody's business and know what's going on in the different departments. And it sort of it got me in trouble in the right ways, in that like I would find things and be like, this has sort of a lot of downstream negative effects for us, or if we make this change here, it's going to sort of hurt ourselves moving forward if we're looking at scale or what we're trying to do in the next couple of years, things like that. So yes, absolutely, I fell onto it, and it sort of I grew into it with many sort of fantastic mentors who weren't necessarily in the space, but much like what we had been talking about, it is somewhat of a new cut, essentially. And with this new cut, you have to understand the like engineering portion, the sales portion, the analytics portion, BI portion, the like overarching business as a whole, and also sort of like finance, etc., right? And so if you don't understand all of those separate components and how they interact with one another, you're not really going to be able to affect good change. So that's kind of the nascence of me starting out in revenue operations. And then my company Cutover is just the most wonderful group of, I would say, just intellectuals who are sort of poised to get us to a point where we have things like disaster recovery and continuous change happening in a like almost sort of seamless fashion. And the dialogue is generally human and machine orchestration, but it's so much more than that. And I mean, the platform itself allows for, much like kind of what my role is, which is funny, it allows for leadership, executives, etc., to be able to see these sort of upstream and downstream failure points when they're running a release, when they're migrating from one tool to another. And I would just say that I'm so happy that this is the place where I am at the moment, because it's just like the best group of people doing something that doesn't really exist today. I think a lot of people are using like Excel spreadsheets, and it's just very unintentionally rudimentary. Just people who you talk to and they're like, I always knew that I had a problem, but I didn't know that there was a solution. And I think, funnily enough, that segues perfectly into like revenue operations,
Yeah.
which you just kind of the same thing, right? Where you understand the sort of overarching whole, you're orchestrating between all of these different systems and disparate people. You are facilitating the communications. You are sort of the proverbial eyes on the prize, right? And you have this sky level view, but you can also dive all the way deep and like roll your sleeves up and get into the nitty gritty. Yeah, so it's a little bit about me, revenue operations, and my company. And the next up was, what was the next?
We can jump straight into our theme. So tell me about your current processes when it comes to um, coaching your reps.
Yeah, I think when it comes to salespeople, they're kind of um, they're sort of this very eclectic group of people who, like some who've been in the system for a very long time, who've worked in some of the largest companies in the world, and some who've like only worked in really small companies doing like very small scale, high velocity sales. And so I think when you are working with reps, there is no one specific way to do something, right? Or to
Yeah.
train something or whatever. And so understanding that like something that may work for rep A might not work for rep B. And the same is true of what we call them BDRs, but the sort of cold calling,
Okay.
emailing,
Yeah.
sort of lead generation folks. Those ones, not they aren't always fresh out of school. Sometimes they've been doing it for such a long time. They are enterprise folks, and they know what they're doing, and they're so,
Okay.
you know, perfect for the role, kind of. But yeah, so I guess high level, I think that there is no specific one answer, but I think when you think about the what you're trying to convey, it's really important to sort of speak to your audience and know who you're talking to. So obviously you have to build some sort of relationship rapport to understand like what's your motivating factor, like how can I convince you to do what I need you to do for the betterment of the business. And some people it's simple enough and they're just like, yep, got it, go. Like you don't
Yeah.
really have to tell much. And then there's other people who might just be sort of, you know, questioning. And I think understanding like everybody acts within reason, everybody has logic to whatever they do. So just understanding their logic. Language is a puzzle, and
Yeah.
understanding what puzzle pieces to put together to get what's in my head into yours. Uh, so I think that's kind of a long-winded way of saying you have to tailor your objective or tailor what you're trying to sort of say or get across to your reps. I think the other thing that a number of people in my position oftentimes forget is that like we're so sort of, and I say this broadly and it may not be true for everybody, but I would say generally the people who I know in revenue operations are so type A, efficient, like check, check, check. We like our
Yeah.
lists. And it's important to be organized in order to succeed in the role, but also understanding that, you know, there's business sort of business uses. So building a process today may make things perfect for the future, but it's not actually the reality of the situation. So, you know, the importance of the company is to garner revenue. And if I'm sort of clogging up sales by asking you to sort of put in these doddering metrics and make sure that you've got 60 million things, like it kind of it defeats the purpose of what you're trying to achieve. And I think the other thing too is to think almost to the minute scale as well. If you're working with a team of BDRs, however small or large, every single click that that BDR does in a system, in a tool, whatever, like if they have to do that click 17 times a day, each one over the course of a year, that single click can extrapolate to so much time that could be used doing better, more important things. So really understanding what they're doing on a daily basis, which is
Mm.
really hard because you're not like sitting next to them just sort of like watching
Just
every single
watching.
play. But thinking through like if I, you know, if I run this like sequence, what is some way where I can you know, move these things to be so much easier in the sight line, or make sure it's above the fold so that they don't have to scroll 17 like pages through to find what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Um, and I think if they see that in you and also see that, you know, for instance, like I need you to do this. I understand that this is going to take you an extra 5 clicks, for instance, but understanding that I'm asking you to do this, I've also sort of built in something here to make it so that this over here is significantly easier for you to do. So I'm not just continuously sort of piling on your plate. I'm
Mm.
cognizant of what you have to suffer on a daily basis and trying to not only make your life easy, but also sort of, in addition, do what's best for the company over here, right? And so
Yeah.
sometimes that sort of that balance makes this interaction between salespeople and operations a little bit more seamless because they get that you're on their side and your objective
Yeah.
is to make their lives just simple, you know, less difficult.
Yeah.
I'm not sort of like build in process every single day, so all you're doing is just like typing
Yeah.
in Salesforce rather than selling, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting because a number of people are sort of trying to find that way to have a process that's like sustainable as they get more and more reps on board? Because I'm sure in a team of like 3 reps, you could have someone in the ops side having an amazing idea of what's going on. So what kind of systems do you have in place to kind of keep up to date with the reps that you support?
Um, I think keeping up to date with them, and I'm sort of building for scale. I've worked in sort of a broad array of different sized companies, so I've seen what sort of
Okay.
being in like a 300 rep, maybe more scenario looks like versus 15 or 3. And so just thinking over time how it's going to grow and scale is something, again, that sort of far reaching thought
Mm,
process. um, but I guess the sort of Slack is obviously the bread and butter of keeping in
mm,
communications. I think um, understanding sort of what you can automate to make more simple. Like different companies before I've used something, I forget the name of it at the moment, but it essentially will like send something to Slack or send something to your email, what have you, if you set up certain triggers in different systems. Like, if
oh,
there's a
cool.
win, so that everybody's like on board and can congratulate the team who's succeeded in a sale that's
Mm,
been X number of months in the making, or um, making sure that like you have things like office hours. Like sometimes office
mm,
hours seem kind of pointless, I guess, to some extent. But I think that it's just knowing that there's somebody there on my team who's able to sort of like sit and like just like we'll be working, but if you choose to come in, by all means, like bring us your problems, we'll bring you solutions.
yeah.
So I think just like keeping that open door policy, and like trying to understand what's important for everybody to know, and making sure that, again, that you're not bombarding people. So I don't send them like have an email automatically sent every single time like a lead comes in or something, because you're just going to get bombarded and then you're
Yeah.
never going to get those emails. So really sort of taking a cost benefit analysis of what's the most important thing for you to understand and how is
Okay.
the most simplest way to get it to you. And I think like an old mentor of mine actually said something once that has resonated for a very long time, and it's a quote from Abraham Lincoln, and he wrote a letter which was like 3 pages to a general of his, and at the very end there's a postscript saying, "I'm sorry that this letter was so long. I didn't have time to write a short one." And it's so very, very true
Oh
that
wow,
you
yeah.
like, need to take time to be concise and like have 4 lines rather than 6 pages. So
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's very easy when you're doing loads of different things to take a step back and think kind of strategically about like how am I going to get the message out? Where is this going? Is this a sustainable system? And that kind of thing. And I think that seems to be the struggle for most people that I speak to, where it's like we have all this to do and it's great, but where are we going to be next month, or how is this going to keep going, and that kind of thing.
yeah, and I think it's funny too, because I think that there are a lot of times where people will like have these marvelous ideas about automation, about new
Mm,
tools like that, and it's really understanding like when you're ready for them. For instance, like I've been at a company before that wanted to bring on like a customer success tool like Gainsight or Tatango, for instance, and both of those tools are marvelous and necessary for like CS at a specific point in time. But that tool sort of feeds from Salesforce. So if you haven't like succeeded in really training up your CS team on Salesforce and understanding their process in Salesforce and getting exactly what you need in exactly the manner that you need it, bringing those new systems on just gives you that failure point of garbage in, garbage out. You never had a like working basis or a working foundation in the first place. So now you're just like building your sort of Tower of Babel that's,
yeah.
poorly based on a foundation. So I think it's not like it's a great idea. It's just not a great idea for now, because we need to
Mm,
get that foundation base layer sort of set before you can actually grow bigger, you know?
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
many companies insist on like the minimalist nothing, like you're
Yeah.
able to do much with Salesforce. It's just it's the extra ability. And obviously homegrown systems are like wonderful and foundational for like when you're growing, as long as you build into them like
Mm,
this is how we're going to scale, or this is how we're going to eventually transition to like a different like a billing system or something, so you're not like stuck 10 years in with some sort of proprietary billing system that got made by some like consultant who was just fresh out of school when you were just in your sort of nascent days, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So do you have what kind of tools do you have in place in terms of your tech stack do you have Salesforce? Is that your CRM? So who do you use on top of that to kind of get your work done? Because I certainly there are so many I haven't heard of, and then everyone will tell me something different. So it's interesting to
Yeah.
know.
It's funny too because I've worked on the East Coast and I've worked on the West Coast, and they seem to stick with their own like side of
Oh,
tools.
really?
Like Sales Loft is a East Coast kind of tool, and Outreach is like a West Coast kind of tool. And everybody I was using, or every company that I was at, used Outreach in the West Coast, and then the East Coast they've all really
Oh,
been
really?
using Sales Loft, and it's such a
How
funny.
funny.
I know. I don't know why, but uh, it's okay. So many of the all of the companies that I've worked with have used like the Sales Loft, the Outreach, Mixmax, the Yesware, which is like the emailing cadence sort of
Okay.
software in order to
Yeah.
like bring out businesses. But I think that like in this day and age, it's kind of interesting because the model was built by I think Salesforce to do things like email sequencing and send out like I have a BDR who like might, and this is hypothetical, like click a button and 15,000 emails are sent to every single person in this very bland fashion who
Yeah.
may not be a specific buyer persona. And being someone who oftentimes is in receipt of those emails, like you just hit the delete button, right? That's
Yeah.
not like anymore. The spray and pray method, like too many people are doing it, too many people adopted it, and now it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
not
It's just
the
does not work.
and I think so many people are just stuck in this sort of like we're just gonna
Mm,
do what like everybody else does, and like it's just you see these terrible click-through rates and things like that, and they're like, I wonder why like marketing isn't doing better. It's like that's not marketing's fault that like
yeah.
the creation of the thing that you're sending out isn't actually like functioning anymore. Like put yourself in the place of the customer. Are you clicking through those emails? No. So like how do you get something really fruitful? And I think like again sort of harkening back to tools aren't always the solution.
Yeah.
We have a number of tools though. So we do have Mixmax and we use that pretty much across the board. It's easy just to sort of track emails in Salesforce and start doing
Okay.
activity metrics and things like that. But less of the sort of spray and pray method because it's not, I don't really approve of it is maybe the wrong word, but something like that.
Yeah.
And then what else? We have obviously a marketing tool. So we use HubSpot. I've historically used Marketo, but Marketo is it's almost like what's the a sledgehammer as opposed to like a little jewelry
Oh,
hammer. Like you
okay.
need Marketo and all of its sort of glory unnecessary. It's like the joke is like the driving the Ferrari to the grocery store. Like you could do it, but it's
Yeah.
kind of a waste of horsepower. But yeah, so yeah, we use HubSpot, which is a pretty like fantastic tool. I have really been trying to get us sort of internal push towards Gong. I love Gong. It's
Okay.
meeting intelligence software, and it sort of gives you a better platform for enablement for your reps because you can hear them on a call. And whereas, like, if you're a customer and I was speaking to you and trying to sell to you, it's inappropriate to have like 10 people from our company like listening in to see how we
Yes.
could do better.
Yeah.
So Gong is a great tool, but it doesn't do very well with accents, unfortunately.
Okay.
And also it could be better for some of the like in the GDPR thing. It works, but it's kind of um, shaky ground a little bit. So
Okay.
yeah, so it's not that great for European companies, and we're a European company too. So, but I really like Gong. And then what else? I think, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I think the sort of primaries are like, what are you using for email? What are you using for your CRM? And what are you using for your marketing tool? Is the like three
Yeah, the
baseline.
three main ones.
Yeah, and
Okay,
a
awesome.
company Slack, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So just quickly, so I understand your current situation within your company, how many have you got in your RevOps team with you?
I have two, so myself and one other
Oh, right, okay.
company. Yeah, I know. I think um, especially if you've been doing it for a long time, I think, especially for smaller companies, it's really like if you have the right team in place, you don't need that large of an organization, as long as you know you're poised to grow the team when the company grows.
Yeah,
So, and
for
then you
sure.
set the like guidelines around sort of inbound requests, right? Like you should, once you get to the point where you're sort of overloaded and drowning, that's kind of,
Yeah.
you know,
That's probably a red flag. I think I need someone else. Amazing. So, just a final question. I don't know if you have to go, but if you were in a room full of like top RevOps professionals, and you could kind of ask them one question about things that they maybe do that you're wondering about, what would you love to just know from the community?
um,
Great
yeah,
question.
I guess like what's your biggest challenge? Because I think it's interesting to see what
Mm,
other people have had difficulty with and why. Because sometimes it's a lot more enlightening than what's your biggest win. Sometimes maybe that, and then they would be
yeah.
able to probably tell you what in deep sort of notion their solution was, and you can sort of noodle on it.